This is the game of the week. If you looked at the introduction to this game, you'll have an idea of what the key positions were and what the best moves were during the game. The game starts off with the e-pawns, but on the second move, white moved the bishop to c4. And I tell the chess players to beware of the matrix. If you see your opponent move the bishop or the queen on the second move, likely they're going to be trying the matrix. And here, black recognized it and made the correct response to the stop the matrix. So great job, black. White continues with the matrix idea, but as soon as black puts the knight on f6, then the matrix is done. In this position, white moves the bishop for the second time in the opening, and I encourage chess players to not move the same piece twice in the opening. With this chess app that I have, if I press the suggestions button, which is green, it will show the 4 best moves. The darker green and the wider the line, the better the move. And if I press details, it'll give you an idea of what the best moves would be for that particular position. As you can see, none of them involve moving the same piece. It has to deal with developing another piece. A lot happens in the next few moves, and as you can see, black moves some of their pieces more than once in the opening, but in that position, black had to, so black was okay. Here, black decides to develop the bishop, but unfortunately black develops it to a square where it's being blocked in by its own pawn on one side, and it also prevents the other pawn from coming out. If we press the suggestions, you can see, well, there's only one move that the computer suggests, and that's moving the d pawn up one square. Going on with the game, we have black moving. White actually does a good move, putting a tempo on the knight of black. And here, think of the ABCs of chess. The black knight is being attacked, but if you think of the ABCs, attack, block, capture, defend, exchange, flee, attack is not always, but oftentimes it's a better response. And in this position, moving the f-pawn up 2 squares is actually the best response. It puts a tempo on the white knight, and white ends up having to lose time moving the queen out of the path of that attack. Moving on, black moves there, and there's a saying in chess that knights on the rim are grim. The more centralized your knight is, in other words, the closer to the center the knight is, the more squares that it can influence. But if the knight goes to the edge of the board, it really can't move to very many squares. And if the bishop's put in the right place on the opposite side, like a black bishop, then the white knight could be trapped and not even be able to move at all. Also, chess players should take time to look for tactics. The best move in this position would be to move the pawn up 2 squares. And usually it's not a good idea to move a different pawn besides the E or the D. But in this position it's okay, because if the A pawn moves to A4, then the knight is trapped. And there's no place that the white knight can move without being captured. And that would be 3 points to white. We will continue with the next sequence of moves, which brings us to our next point. Here, black wants to attack the white queen, but I always tell the chess players to think of 2 or 3 moves and then think of the best. So black's idea was to attack the white queen, but black has a better way of attacking the queen with the same piece and winning another piece at the same time. So if black takes the knight and moves the knight to c3, it captures the pawn and attacks the queen at the same time. So black does the same thing that it wanted to do the first time, which is attack the queen, but also gets a bonus point as well. We'll go through the next few moves of this chess game. And here, you can see the red arrow, the black pawn against the white pawn, but black has a really good move instead. And if you try to look for tactics, you might be able to find them. As you can see, the best move for black would be to move the queen to a5. And on the a5 square, the black queen has an X-ray attack against the king, and it attacks the pawn. Do you see what happens if the queen would take the pawn on c3 in the next move? Let me go ahead and make those moves, and I'll make some kind of crazy move like this. You see what would be next? A fork between the white king and the rook. The king would have to move out of the way, and black would get a free rook. Going on with the moves in the game, we have this position, and here, look for undefended pieces. The black knight is undefended, and the king, if it moves to the f7 square, will leave that knight open to be captured. By putting the black queen in front of the black king, yeah, there could be a trade of queens, but at least white will not get the black knight for free. And if we continue with these moves, now black has a plan. And black's plan is to move the bishop behind the queen so that on the next move the queen could go in front of the king to make a checkmate. But black didn't take the time to see what white had in mind, so white is able to turn the tables by putting the king in check. And then here in this position, black moved to a square in which white could checkmate in 2 moves. As you can see, there were 2 moves that would keep this game going, but black didn't think of what could possibly happen, or at least what white's response would be if the king moved to e8. And when the king moved to e8, we just have 1 check and then a checkmate, and the game is over.